Your Royal Highness, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon. I've been asked to spend 10 minutes talking about the Nuffield Global Focus Programme. I'm going to explain what it is. I'm going to take you on a very brief tour around the world, and then we're going to discuss why it's important. The GFP is an intense travel research programme organised centrally by Nuffield Australia. In simple terms, you set off with a group of 8 other scholars from varying different countries, travelling around on a predetermined itinerary for 5 weeks. I joined a tour in June last year, and I travelled with 8 scholars from Japan, New Zealand, Canada, Australia, Zimbabwe, and Ireland. And all of us had different backgrounds, from running a honeybee enterprise, working for government, to being a salmon farmer. We met in Singapore and then boarded a plane to Tamil Nadu in the south of India. From there, we went to Punjab in northern India, where it borders Pakistan. Then on to Qatar, Germany, and finally the US, where we spent time in DC and Pennsylvania. The idea of the GFP is to show you the same global issues from multiple cultural perspectives and viewpoints, whilst all the time cross-examining your visits through the perspectives of the other people in your group. How I interpret a visit in Qatar might be very different to how my Japanese colleague interprets it. So if you're all sitting comfortably, let's head off around the world. Singapore. The thing about Singapore, where we start, is it gives you a vantage point into Asia, sitting in the heightened tensions between China, Taiwan, the US, India, and Indonesia. You come to appreciate that these are some of the most populous countries in the world, with rising middle classes, rising economies, growing populations, starting to project their influence globally. Consider India as the most populous. China is the second, the US the third, and Indonesia the fourth. It's a visit to ANZ Bank on the 50th floor of a sky-high building that gives us this macroeconomic vantage point. Being so high up and overlooking the global diaspora on the streets really serves to drive this home. Did you know that over 90% of Singaporean food is imported, and only 1% of its land base is set aside for agriculture? For reference, the UK imports 40% of its food. With a trip to the university, we learned that their priority is for self-sufficiency of leafy greens and vegetables, which then explains our next, slightly bizarre trip to various rooftop gardens around the city, growing leafy greens and vegetables. Singapore is clearly very aware of its food insecurity, and that should come as no revelation. But what did come as a revelation is that they are sinking silos under the sea to store vast quantities of rice and edible oils. They have barricaded Marina Bay to keep the seawater out and filled it with potable water. And that's because all of their fresh water, apart from rain, comes from a single river out of Malaysia, a single weak point in food security. The water that comes out of a tap in Singapore has already been drunk 7 times. So Singapore is our first look into this huge and tumultuous corner of the world. But it's also our first view into how other countries deal with food security, genuinely a national security consideration, with many branches of societies working towards the same goal. Now we jump on a plane to Tamil Nadu, the contrasting and beautiful chaos of southern India. We visit single farms where jackfruit, ginger, bananas, coffee, cardamom, corn, buckwheat are all grown on top of each other. There is a vibrancy and freshness, a diversity of food seemingly all within arm's reach that is a challenge to our monoculture agriculture that we take for granted in the West. It contributes to this sense that while the people are economically poor, they're spiritually very rich. But one can't escape the feeling that this is a landscape and people on the brink of change. Foreign investment is creating higher paying and easier jobs, depopulating the countryside, introducing mechanization and simplification to landscapes. This feeling is driven home when we jump on our next plane to the developed Punjab in northern India. We start with a visit to a woolen mill turning over $1 billion US, directly challenging Chinese trade in European markets. It's fascinating to see the names of Western brands on the walls, demanding new traceability and standards. We visit a rice, pepper, potato, and mint farm run by a man my age with a computer science degree from Oxford. Not this chap. It's a very well-run farm, but the soil health is alarming. We hear again and again about the impacts of climate change and what that is having on farms with crop failures, droughts, floods, people not wanting to work in 40-degree heat. We learn that the water table is dropping by 1 meter a year. A whole day spent in Punjab Agricultural University only heightens the impression that these guys are walking headlong into the mistakes that we've made with high tillage, high monocropped chemical agriculture, but with a much less forgiving environment. Punjab is the bread and rice basket of India, 1.5% of India's land, producing 50% of wheat and 30% of rice. Production is heavily supported by the government. Ministers pay to have their faces printed on the side of fertilizer and seed bags. Harvests are run straight down the road 5 hours to Delhi's 33 million inhabitants. India is eye-opening. This populated and polluted, beautiful and diverse country. But the single impression that I leave with is how fragile their food systems are, under enormous demand, often malevolent external investment, attracted by the scale of the market opportunity and very vulnerable soils. But talking of soils, let's fly to Qatar, the land of sand. We start our trip by meeting the Australian ambassador to Qatar, who gives us a helicopter view of the country. In 2017, the GCC, the Gulf Cooperation Council, fell out with Qatar over its links to terrorism and closed Qatar's only land border with Saudi Arabia. Until then, 80% of Qatar's food was coming through the GCC. This embargo ended in 2021, but even now, collectively, the Gulf states import 91% of their food. You can imagine what Qatar did. They spent their way out of the problem. Within 6 months, they'd built a 20,000-head dairy unit in the desert. The infrastructure cost alone was $1 billion US, and there was 1 labor unit per square meter. The government requires them to hold 12 months of feed stocks for the animals, which is imported in shipping containers from around the world. They develop a strategic port with a grain silo that can hold enough food for 6 months and an edible oil refinery with a 9,000-ton capacity. One of the most fascinating visits we went on was to an abattoir and feedlot where we see live goats that have been airlifted from Sudan and Syria to feed the local elite. And you talk about being climate conscious and choosing the vegetarian option at lunch. Visit Qatar. Qatar shows us another perspective on food security, this time a sudden trade-induced shock, leading to massive government spending on national food infrastructure. From Qatar, we land in Germany, and it feels like we're coming home. At this point, we're about 20 days and 20 nights, 50 visits, and 4 countries into our tour. I can't work out what time zone it is. I know we've all traveled extensively, but I haven't traveled this intensively before. And I think to myself, maybe that's the point. We're being hosted by this amazing man, Stefan, who took over his farm aged 15 when his father dies, and now has expanded across arable, beef, chicken, sheep, beef, sorry, I said beef, eggs. I don't have time to tell you of all the visits that we're going on, but I will tell you that it is eye-opening to now be looking at European politics in contrast to the Far East and the Middle East. This is driven home by a visit to the Bundestag, the German parliament, and spending the day and evening with politicians of varying persuasions. Every farmer we speak to is unhappy with what they perceive as a lack of government support. And what a week to say that in the UK. I'm beginning to get the sense that in the UK and Europe, we've become so comfortable with the fact that we can produce food that we've totally take it for granted. And we think it'll go on forever. Our government now seems solely focused on environmental goods, while the rest of the world is arming themselves against food insecurity. But never mind that, we're off to the US. The single biggest thing that hits you when you land in the US is scale. We visit the USDA, where we're rotated through a series of presentations from different departments, throwing mind-boggling stats at us. The US Farm Bill is $1 trillion. They spend $29 billion subsidizing farmers as a result of the China-US trade spat. $20 billion was paid out in crop insurance this year, and they cover indemnities of $150 billion. Why? That's the question we should be asking. Why? Why are they spending these enormous sums? And then the USDA director, Bruce Kettler, comes up with a quote on screen. The Farm Bill is an issue of national security. But we also see foreign direct investment in the same light, the presenter continues. Investing in foreign agricultural development increases the security and value of future trade agreements. The penny is dropping. It's like we're hearing the same conversation, but from the other side, that we were having in Qatar and India. We spend the afternoon at the New Zealand embassy, and in the evening we think we're going to have a relaxing barbecue. But then the ambassador invites all the trade attachés from various other embassies, and the Senate Budget Select Committee secretaries, and we drink terrible American beer into the early hours. So what? So what? I said at the beginning that the GFP is about seeing global issues from multiple cultural perspectives. Well, this is the global perspective that I left with. We have no idea how fragile our food security is. It is fragile on the level of trade, as demonstrated time and time again. It is fragile on the level of climate change, animal disease pandemics, and population migration. And now we're no longer part of the EU, we're more vulnerable than ever. Because of this, we've got to take food security seriously. Not only does that mean having regulations in place to protect UK producers, it means investing in infrastructure, domestic fertilizers, on-farm innovation, crop diversity, the list goes on. Some of the farms I visited feel like canaries in the mine shaft, a vision of what is to come when the climate changes further. We are really fortunate in the UK to have incredible soils and a temperate climate. We take that for granted. We are going to need to rely on those to an extent that we do not yet appreciate in the future. I've focused today, as I hope is obvious, on food security, but I could have spoken on many other themes that came out of the GFP. On the fact that it was the most insightful experience I've ever had into my own leadership style, people management, and communication. On the insights into the entrepreneurial mindsets of different countries. Before I left, my mental frame of reference was national. I would think about things broadly from a UK perspective. But the GFP gives you this opportunity to reframe that to a global mindset. As the Nuffield Farming Scholarship Trust, building the leaders of tomorrow, I think that is absolutely critical. We all get so familiar in our own contexts that we forget the biases and assumptions that we walk around with. We think that everyone sees the world in the same way that we do, wants the same things. And in fact, I want to end on this, one of my favorite literary quotes from the travel writer Laurie Lee, born in 1914. He says, "Before I left my valley, I thought that everywhere was like this. Then I went away, and when I came home, I realized that nowhere was like this." I really hope that we can muster the support from sponsors to give more scholars the opportunities that I had. I think it gives scholars a global perspective into critical issues that cannot be achieved from individual study alone. And that is a perspective that can be put to work in society and that will stay with you for a lifetime. Thank you.